The motion is adopted.
Right now on Current News, bill passed. The House of Representatives approves the COVID relief bill and it now heads to the president's desk. Plus, feeding the hungry. We'll introduce you to the religious sisters making it their mission to make sure everyone has enough to eat. Huge award. A Catholic school is named Best in the Borough for the third year in a row. Their secret to success. And papal message, what the Pope is now saying to Christians that have emigrated from Iraq. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. The ayes have it. The House of Representatives passing President Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus package in a 220 to 211 vote, paving the way to the president's desk later this week. The passage is the first legislative achievement of the new administration. Karen Kafa reports for the latest from Washington.
President Biden's massive $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill clearing its final hurdle on Capitol Hill.
On this vote, the yeas are 220, the nays are 211. The motion is adopted.
The House with the final sign-off on Senate changes to the bill, including narrowing eligibility for stimulus checks and taking out the House-approved federal minimum wage increase. Democrats describing this not as a win for President Biden, but for millions of Americans.
This is a momentous day in the history of our country because we have passed historic, consequential, and transformative legislation.
The bill to provide, among other things, direct payments of up to $1,400 per person to families earning less than $160,000 a year and individuals less than $80,000. A $300 weekly federal boost to unemployment benefits through September 6th. $15 billion for long-term, low-interest loans for small businesses, and funding to chart the next, somewhat thornier phases of the pandemic, like vaccine distribution and school reopenings.
We, of course, are moving full speed ahead on the implementation of the bill because we know the American people need help and need it as soon as possible.
Despite the bill's popularity in polls, not a single Republican in the Senate or the House voted in favor.
It showers money on special interests, but spends less than 9% on actually defeating the virus.
In Washington, Karen Kafa, Currents News.
Breaking down further what is and isn't in the new bill, $70 billion is being slated for vaccine distribution and COVID testing. $50 billion goes to small businesses, including $28.6 billion in grant relief, specifically for restaurants. $130 billion goes to elementary, middle, and high schools to help them reopen safely, while the child tax credit rises from $1,000 to $3,000 per child. What isn't included in all this funding? Hyde Amendment protections, which stop federal money from going to abortions. Ahead of the vote on Capitol Hill, U.S. bishops prayed that Washington would protect the unborn, saying in a statement, as the American Rescue Plan Act was being written, Catholic bishops reached out to every House and Senate office to express our support for providing additional relief to help poor and vulnerable people who are most at risk of harm from this pandemic, and our strong conviction that this relief should also protect the unborn and their right to life. We are grateful this legislation addresses many positive provisions. However, it is unconscionable that Congress has passed the bill without critical protections needed to ensure that billions of taxpayer dollars are used for life-affirming health care and not for abortion. A crisis appears to be brewing along the southern border. Customs and Border Protection says around 108,000 undocumented migrants have been arrested so far this year. This as the number of unaccompanied minors found along the border reaches an all-time high. President Biden has been reversing many Trump administration immigration policies, the former president calling it, quote, a terrible thing to see. The White House is refusing to call the situation at the U.S.-Mexico border a crisis, but some lawmakers are blasting the administration and calling on them to take action.
Joe Biden.
In a tent city near the U.S.-Mexico border, Ligia Giselle Amador Zavala waits with her two children. She says she left Honduras 9 months ago to seek asylum in the United States. Lihia says she jumped the border 2 times illegally because of desperation to find work. Both times she was sent back to Mexico. Now she says she'll wait for a legal way to cross. The anticipation spreading through this tent city in Tijuana, Mexico, speaks to the hope these migrants have that the Biden administration will be more receptive to their plights. But the increasing surge of migrants on the southern border is reaching emergency levels for the administration. U.S. authorities have arrested and encountered more than 100,000 migrants in the 4 weeks before March 3rd, the highest levels for that same time period in at least 5 years. And new data shows there are more than 3,400 unaccompanied children in the custody of Customs and Border Protection. Federal immigration officials are scrambling to make room. This temporary processing site for migrants was opened just over a month ago. A Homeland Security official says the facility is significantly overcrowded, mostly with children. Republicans and some Democrats say the Biden administration isn't moving fast enough to keep the migration crisis under control.
They are completely unprepared for what is going on the border now, and they're going to be even more unprepared for what will be happening in the coming months.
The Biden administration says the majority of migrants are being turned away at the border and refuse to describe the situation as a crisis.
Look, I don't think we need to sit here and put new labels on what we have already conveyed is challenging. What we have conveyed is a top priority for the president.
But many more families are being allowed to wait in the U.S. for their immigration court dates. The Biden administration says it's trying to implement a humanitarian immigration policy, but new concerns grow as many migrants are testing positive for COVID-19. It's been 1 year since U.S. dioceses began curbing public masses due to the pandemic. Calling for solidarity, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops released a statement Tuesday saying, "There is so much to learn from this global suffering. We must build on the kindness and openness that we have witnessed on the local level by creating more social structures that not only heal the fractures and isolation felt by so many during this pandemic, but will prevent such divisions from occurring again." New York City health officials are seeing an increase in COVID-19 variants, saying they account for 51% of all cases in the city.
A variant that's vaccine resistant, we're not seeing that. What we are seeing is variants that are more infectious and therefore spread the disease more. And that's a real issue.
As of Wednesday, the city has administered close to 2.5 million vaccines, and eligibility now includes anyone 60 years or older. We continue to celebrate Women's History Month here on Currents News. Today, we're introducing you to Sister Caroline and Sister Marie of St. John's Bread and Life, who have made it their mission to feed the hungry in the Diocese of Brooklyn. Jessica Easthope is in Bedford-Stuyvesant with their story.
Anyone who visits St. John's Bread and Life can tell it's a well-oiled machine. It feeds 25,000 people every year and sustains 21 other food pantries.
1 zucchini, 2 peppers, 1 bag of beef.
But what you can't tell by just looking is the machine is powered by nuns.
When you belong to a religious community, if you put the word out that, you need volunteers, people show up.
Sister Caroline Tweedy is the executive director of Bread and Life, an organization with an upper management staff made up of mostly women.
We look at a problem collectively. We address that collectively. We bring a woman's intuition to what we do.
I think close to 3 million.
Sister Caroline and Associate Executive Director Sister Marie Sorensen take a hands-on approach to ending hunger, something they say comes naturally for sisters.
We jump in and we do the work that needs to be done.
It's Catholic Sisters Week, and St. John's Bread and Life called on communities of sisters to help support its mission. In just days, enough money was raised to feed the people who rely on the pantry for 3 months. And they're not stopping there. Some have even joined the volunteer staff. Sister Melissa Camardo blends in.
It's run by so many talented, committed, passionate women, and it's a really great example to all of us.
Sister Melissa isn't afraid to get her hands dirty, because after all, ending hunger in a borough where 20% of its residents are food insecure is heavy lifting.
What I can do to make a difference, try to use my own hands and heart to respond to that.
The sisters say what puts Bread and Life a cut above the rest is its powerful women and their ability to work together.
Women know things can't get done alone. The power is in working together, sharing talents.
During the most challenging of times, the machine doesn't stop because these sisters won't let it. It's all part of their power. In Bedford-Stuyvesant, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
A year into the pandemic, and some churches are telling parishioners they have to come back to Mass. Coming up, we'll tell you why they want people in the pews and the safety measures they're taking. Plus, the Pope has a message for Christians that have fled Iraq, asking them to return home. And how a centuries-old forest will play a key role in the rebuilding of Notre Dame nearly 2 years after it went up in flames. For the third year in a row, Sacred Heart Catholic Academy in Glendale, Queens has been named the best Catholic school in the borough. This coming after the city threatened to shut down its pre-K program, but the school fought back. Emily Drewby has the story from Glendale.
This is my kindergarten classroom.
From going to class here to having his own class. Peter Stam loves Sacred Heart Catholic Academy of Glendale so much, he's now a teacher. Keeping former students close, one of the reasons the school won big in the Best of the Borough Awards.
For people to vote this much and to keep bringing their kids here, it's really a cool thing to say.
A trifecta win. For the third year in a row, they were voted the best Catholic school in Queens. The competition is put together by Schneps Media.
The Beth Page Best of the Borough is really a program that's all about the opinions of the public. You know, we have hundreds of thousands of votes that come through each year. So, you know, to win is a major accomplishment.
The award voted on by the community, and the school has a strong one. Parent Christopher Russo explains.
We have an amazing set of teachers and administrators here. We're backed by a very strong parent base. We also have a good parish and community of Glendale that loves our school. And we have an alumni of 80 plus years that backs our school.
The third win is a big deal. Board Chairman Fred Haller says they had big competition.
We have strong schools, strong Catholic high schools in Queens, and strong grammar schools, and we're among the smallest in the entire borough.
It was also a tumultuous year for all New York City schools, forced to adapt and adjust because of the pandemic.
In one day, an entire faculty that maybe used some technology sometimes really adjusted, knocks it out of the park.
The school survived and thrived. Enrollment grew this year, but most importantly, students and parents are happy.
And I always look forward to coming here every single day.
I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better education.
I think it's just the environment. It's so warm. It's like my second family.
Now they're enjoying the big win. Faculty tells me the recognition brings in more students and even gets their current students noticed by better high schools and colleges. So the only question left to ask, will they be able to make it 4 years in a row? I guess we'll find out. In Glendale, Emily Drewby, Currents News.
366 days, that's how long it will be since Archbishop Alan Vigneron dispensed all Catholics from their Sunday obligation in the Archdiocese of Detroit. But this Sunday, he's telling them to come back. Father Mario Amore from the Archdiocese joins us now. So, Father, this Sunday, March 14th, you're back in business. Archbishop Vigneron is restoring the Sunday Mass obligation. Talk about the significance of this date.
Well, absolutely. We're very excited. I remember last year, it was Friday the 13th that we got the notice that masses would be suspended for, an amount of time we weren't sure of at the time. And so we are just about, or we will be at a year. It begins with the Vigil Mass on this Saturday, March 13th. The dispensation is being lifted, and so we're ready to welcome back all of those who are able.
Wow. The Archbishop said something that caught my eye. He said, God did not come to us virtually. He came to us and continues to come to us in the flesh. As Catholics, unmediated contact with the real presence of the flesh and blood of our Lord in offering the sacrifice to the Father is irreplaceable and essential. But what about those who still can't make it to Mass or are too afraid to come back, like the elderly or the sick?
Mm-hmm. There are, while the general dispensation has been lifted, there still are particular dispensations that are being extended. And so for those over 65, those people who are just too fearful to come back at this point, women who are pregnant, and anyone who's taking care of an elderly parent or grandparent or a friend, those particular dispensations will still apply. And so we still can continue to ask people to tune into live stream masses and to pray that prayer of spiritual communion. But as the Archbishop said, as John 6 tells us, there's nothing that substitutes for eating and drinking the flesh and blood of Christ.
So tell us, for the people that are able to come back, what are the churches doing to keep parishioners safe?
Sure. Well, we have to remember that although the dispensation is lifted this coming Sunday, we've been welcoming people back to Mass here in the Archdiocese of Detroit since mid-May. And so this is not something new to us. We've been doing the proper protocols and procedures, cleaning the churches, allowing for social distancing, people being especially attentive to what we pass out and what we don't, limiting those social interactions. And so everything that you would expect us to be doing, we're doing, and we're doing well. And I think your churches will be one of the cleanest places that you'll be going.
There are a few other dioceses across the country who are also reinstating the Sunday Mass obligation this month. Portland, Tyler, Biloxi. Is Archbishop Vigneron in talks with these other dioceses? Did they all work together at all?
I'm not privy to that information, but I would assume, as brother priests talk, among ourselves about, what we're doing in this time of pandemic, I have to assume that the Archbishop is in talks with his brother bishops about when they think, collectively is a good time to begin to invite people back to Mass. I would assume that those conversations are happening.
So I think there's a lot of dioceses across the country that are still letting people stay at home and not, reinstating that obligation. What do you say to people who are like, what? I'm not going back yet. It's not time, even though they are healthy and they can come back.
Sure. And I think what we've been challenging people since we've been back to Mass is really to evaluate all of the other parts of your lives. Are you going to restaurants? Are you going out shopping? Are you, gathering with large groups of people? If the answer to those questions is yes, then you're ready to come back to Mass. If the answer is no, then perhaps one of those particular dispensations still applies to you.
All right, Father Mario Amore from the Archdiocese of Detroit, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Now to some other changes across the country. Texas is reopened. The Lone Star State is allowing all businesses to operate at 100% capacity and has gotten rid of its mask mandate. The governor says the economic impacts of lockdowns is too great to keep them in place. Experts worry the decision is too soon and could lead to huge spikes in cases. Alaska is the first state to make the COVID-19 vaccine available to 16-year-olds. They also got rid of all eligibility requirements for people who work or live in the state. More than 1/4 of all citizens and 90% of elderly Alaskans have received at least one shot. And President Biden told the Department of Health and Human Services to buy an additional 100 million doses of Johnson & Johnson's vaccine. The Biden administration is hoping to reach its goal of having enough vaccines to inoculate every American adult by the end of May. This, as a group of Catholic scholars believe it's morally acceptable for anyone to receive any of the COVID-19 vaccines, despite the Johnson & Johnson vaccine using aborted baby cell lines for testing. They explain, saying, quote, Catholics and indeed all persons of goodwill who embrace a culture of life for the whole human family, born and unborn, can use these vaccines without fear of moral culpability for abortion. Turning to Arkansas, the governor there signed a bill into law banning nearly all abortions in the state. A sweeping legislation supporters hope will encourage the U.S. Supreme Court to revisit Roe v. Wade. Under the new measure, abortions will only be allowed if needed to save the life of the mother. Performing or attempting to perform an abortion will be considered an unclassified felony. Anyone convicted could face a prison sentence or up to $100,000 in fines. Pope Francis, fresh off his trip to Iraq, has a message to Christians who have fled the land of Abraham.
Lasciato tutto come Abramo, come lui custodite la fede e la speranza e siate tessitori di amicizia e di fratellanza là dove siete. E se potete, tornate.
The church itself is at risk of disappearing from the country. The pontiff calling himself a penitential pilgrim, wanting to feel the pain caused by war and terrorism. According to the papal charity Aid to the Church in Need, 1,200 Christians were killed in Iraq between 2003 and March of 2015 alone. The numbers of Christians living there has decreased from around 1 to 1.4 million by the Second Gulf War to around 300 to 400,000. In his first interview since stepping down from the Vatican's Congregation of Divine Worship, Cardinal Robert Sarah rejected claims that he and Pope Francis are enemies. The Pope simply accepted his resignation after Sarah turned 75. He spoke about his resignation with an Italian newspaper, saying, "More than ever, the Church needs bishops who speak clearly, free and faithful to Jesus Christ and to the doctrinal and moral teachings of his gospel. I intend to continue this mission and even amplify it." Four 200-year-old oak trees are being cut down to replace the iconic spire on the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The wood is coming from a former royal forest in France. French President Emmanuel Macron said the spire will be rebuilt exactly as it was before it went up in flames nearly 2 years ago. In January and February, around 1,000 trees and more than 200 French forests were selected to be used in construction. Macron promised to rebuild the cathedral by 2024. Still to come on Currents News, by the grace of God, a 90-year-old woman narrowly escapes a house fire after a car plows into her home. And starting the year off right, the generous tip that left a waitress speechless. A 90-year-old woman is thankful to be alive after a car crashed into her home and caught fire. Shattered glass and charred possessions are all that's left after the vehicle slammed into her home in the middle of the night. A neighbor helped her escape with no time to spare.
So I knew something was on fire, and I stepped out the door, and my neighbor's house was on fire. By the grace of God, we're still around, and Shirley is still alive, and that I am grateful for.
Wow. First responders spent almost 12 hours removing the car from the home. In total, the crash caused $140,000 in damages. The driver and passenger were able to get out of the car. The driver was taken to the hospital. And finally tonight, one restaurant worker got a big boost in honor of the new year. The waitress named Tanya was serving 2 women who met for lunch at Silman's Tavern in Ohio. They told her they didn't cook often since both of them had lost their husbands. Tanya then revealed she too had recently become a widow, and the 3 women bonded over their shared experiences. When the bill of roughly $100 was due, the pair gave the waitress a generous tip for her good service, $2,021, bringing the meal's total to $21,21,21. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.